The hair loss pipeline in 2026 is the most crowded it has been in 30 years. 6 serious programs, 3 separate mechanisms nobody had touched before. One of them regrew hair in humans in a way that made dermatologists sit up. And I think most of you are going to use that information to make the worst decision of your hair loss life. Because there's a thing that happens when someone reads a pipeline article. They think it's coming. 2 or 3 years. I'll wait. Why start something with side effects when the real fix is almost here? And then 3 years pass, the drug is still in phase 2, and their hairline has moved a centimeter that no drug on this list, including the good ones, will ever bring back. So I'm going to do both halves of this honestly. I'll walk you through every serious compound in development, what it actually does, what stage it's actually at, and how far away it realistically is. And then I'm going to tell you why the correct response to all of it is probably the opposite of waiting. I'm Jomo. I run Balding Out Loud. I don't sell hair products and I don't take pharma money. Everything on screen is cited, all of it is public, and you can check every claim. Let's install a filter first because you're going to need it long after this video. Drug development is a funnel with a brutal dropout rate. Roughly speaking, of compounds that enter phase 1 human testing, something like 1 in 10 make it all the way to approval. In dermatology, the number is not better. Now think about what a pipeline article is. It's a list of compounds at the wide end of that funnel, presented as if they were at the narrow end. Every single one of them is written up with the same breathless framing. 9 of 10 will not arrive. Second problem, the sample size illusion. A phase 1 or early phase 2 study might have 20, 30, 50 people. At that size, an effect can look spectacular and be noise. The history of hair loss is full of compounds that produced beautiful phase 2 photos and then flatly failed in a properly powered phase 3. We'll do a whole chapter on those in a minute because that graveyard is the most useful thing in this video. Third, press releases are marketing documents. A company announcing positive top-line results is a company that needs to raise money. They choose which endpoint to lead with. When you see a result reported only as % of patients showing improvement and not as absolute hair count change per square centimeter, that is a choice, and it's usually not a flattering one. So the filter is what phase, how many people, what endpoint, and who's paying. 2 minutes of technical grounding and it'll pay you back forever. Phase 1 asks, does it poison anyone? Small, often healthy volunteers, sometimes no efficacy measure at all. A phase 1 result tells you almost nothing about whether a hair drug works. Phase 2 is where efficacy first shows up. 2A is exploratory, does anything happen at all? 2B is dose finding, how much, how often, and it's usually the first properly randomized, placebo-controlled look. Phase 3 is the real test. Hundreds to thousands of patients, multiple sites, and the endpoint agreed in advance with regulators. And that endpoint in hair is almost always the same thing, target area hair count. A 1 centimeter square patch of scalp, tattooed or dot marked so they photograph the exact same spot every visit, hairs counted by a blinded assessor or by software. Usually at 24 weeks and often again at 48. Here's the number that gives you a sense of scale. 5% topical minoxidil over a year typically produces somewhere in the region of an extra 15 to 20 hairs per square centimeter versus placebo. Finasteride is broadly in the same territory. That's the bar. When a company reports a result, mentally put it next to that number. And watch for the placebo arm because it is never zero. Placebo groups in hair trials routinely gain a few hairs and occasionally do quite well. Any result reported without its placebo comparison is not a result.